Some cold cases are finally solved after decades of meticulous detective work, while others remain a mystery. Across the U.S., there are serial killers who have never been caught and missing people that have never been found. Here are 5 famous mysteries that have remained unsolved. Sherry Lynn Marlar went missing from Greenville in 1984. On June 6, 1984, 12-year-old Greenville native Sherry Lynn Marlar went into town with her stepfather to run errands. While he went to the bank to sign some papers, he gave her $1 to buy a soda from a vending machine and told her to meet him back at his truck in 15 minutes. She hasn't been seen since. Sherry was last seen at approximately 9:30 a.m. on June 6, 1984 in downtown Greenville, Alabama. She and her stepfather were at the First National Bank and he gave her $1 to buy a soda. Sherry left the bank and was last seen crossing the street towards the Chevron gas station. When her stepfather returned to his pickup truck 15 minutes later, Sherry was nowhere to be found. Investigators got information that Sherry may have been in the St. Stephen, Alabama area, near Beto Road. Later that month, there were 3 reported sightings of Sherry by 3 different people after her disappearance. Each time, she was accompanied by a man, described as about 50 years old and 5'8" tall with a husky build, a weathered complexion and crow's feet around his eyes. One witness who saw her at a truck stop in Conley, Georgia, said Sherry called the man BJ. All 3 of the witnesses stated that Sherry was noticeably upset, disheveled and appeared dazed. The last sighting was in a mall in New Orleans, Louisiana later in 1984. None of the sightings were confirmed. Sherry is described as a tomboy who enjoyed farm work in 1984 and knew how to drive a tractor. Her mother does not believe she ran away. She had been looking forward to watching her favorite television show and visiting her grandmother on the day of her disappearance, and she didn't have any significant problems in her life. Her case remains unsolved and is classified as a non-family abduction. Marlar's disappearance was featured on the TV show Unsolved Mysteries. Passengers on the fishing boat Investor were killed in Craig in 1982. Almost 36 years ago, 8 people, including a man, his pregnant wife, their 2 children, and teenage deckhands, were shot to death aboard a fishing boat called the Investor on September 6, 1982, people reported. The killer is then believed to have returned to the scene the next afternoon to set the boat on fire. It was the biggest mass murder in Alaskan history and rocked the small fishing town of Craig, where it took place. Does the time ever come when a community stops remembering a murdered group of its own? In the case of Blaine, possibly not. A Bellingham resident, John Peel, was later tried twice for the slayings. His first trial ended in a hung jury. His second trial acquitted him. The Investor remains the biggest unresolved murder case in Alaska history. The names of the Investor victims are read aloud every year at Blaine's Blessing of the Fleet ceremony, along with the names of every other Blaine person lost at sea going back to the early 1900s. As the names are spoken, a bell is rung, and people step forward to add a flower to a wreath that is cast onto the bay. Morgan Nick disappeared from an Alma ballpark in 1995. 6-year-old Morgan Nick was last seen on June 9, 1995 at a ballpark in Alma, Arkansas, according to 5 News. An unidentified man in a red truck who was seen driving away around the same time Nick disappeared was deemed a suspect, but after countless leads, authorities are no closer to finding her. Morgan Nick and her mother, Pauline Nick, went to a Little League baseball game in their town of Alma, Arkansas. At around 10:30 p.m., Morgan asked her mother if she could catch lightning bugs with her friends. At first, her mother was uncertain, but eventually let her go. She was last seen at 10:45 p.m. by her friends, emptying sand out of her shoes alone near her mother's car. while her group of friends emptied their shoes a few dozen feet away. Morgan's friends reported seeing a creepy man talking to Morgan as she was putting her shoes back on. When the game ended shortly thereafter, Morgan's friends returned without her. They told Colleen that Morgan was at her car, but when Colleen returned to the car, Morgan was not there. She has not been seen or heard from since. Nick's family founded the Morgan-Nick Foundation to provide immediate assistance to families of missing children. The Arkansas Alert System is also named in honor of Nick. Pauline Robin Burgett was fatally stabbed in 1978. On March 12, 1978, Chad Burgett returned home to Phoenix after a weekend away with his mother to find his sister, Pauline Robin, murdered with multiple stab wounds. It's a cold case that stunned the community in 1978. Whoever went in and brutally murdered 16-year-old Pauline Robin Burgett probably knew her, said police. The murder has been tough on her family and her only brother, knowing someone out there got away with the crime. Not a day goes by that I don't think about it. The vision is very clear in my mind like it happened yesterday, said Chad Burgett. Chad and his mom had been out of town on a weekend trip. They returned and found Pauline in her bedroom. She had been sexually assaulted and murdered, and it was brutal. Whoever committed the crime, this was a crime of anger and rage, and Robin knew her perpetrator, said Detective Clark Schwarzkopf. Chad was just 11 years old when it happened. Detectives continue to work the cold case and say they do have forensic evidence from the crime scene. But there are many complicating factors, says Det. Schwarzkopf. For the 16-year-old who had dropped out of high school, being out of school, she had a lot of boyfriends, a lot of ex-boyfriends. What we're hoping is somewhere along the line someone said something to someone and admitted to something, said Schwarzkopf. Police say there were threats made against Pauline from people at an apartment complex where she used to babysit. They do have DNA in the case, but they don't have a source for it just yet. Six-year-old pageant queen John Bennett Ramsey was found dead in her family's home in Boulder in 1996. John Bennett Patricia Ramsey was an American child beauty queen who was killed in her family's home in Boulder, Colorado. A lengthy handwritten ransom note was found in the house, and John Bennett's father John found her body in the basement of their house about 8 hours after she was reported missing. She sustained a broken skull from a blow to the head and had been strangled. A garrote was found tied around her neck. The autopsy report stated that the official cause of death was asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma. Her death was ruled a homicide. The case generated nationwide public and media interest, in part because her mother Patsy Ramsey, herself a former beauty queen, had entered John Bennett in a series of child beauty pageants. The crime is still unsolved and remains an open investigation with the Boulder Police Department. The police initially suspected that the ransom note had been written by John Bennett's mother and that the note and appearance of the child's body had been staged by her parents in order to cover up the crime. However, in 1998, the district attorney said that due to a new DNA analysis, none of the immediate family members were under suspicion for the crime. Also in 1998, the police and the DA both said that John Bennett's brother Burke, who was 9 years old at the time of her death, was not a suspect. The Ramseys gave several televised interviews but resisted police questioning except on their own terms. In October 2013, unsealed court documents revealed that a 1999 grand jury had recommended filing charges against John Bennett's parents for permitting the child to be in a threatening situation. John and Patsy were also accused of hindering the prosecution of an unidentified person who had committed the crime of murder in the first degree and child abuse resulting in death. However, the DA determined that there was insufficient evidence to pursue a successful indictment. In 2002, the DA's successor took over investigation of the case from the police and primarily pursued an alternative theory that an intruder had committed the killing. In 2003, Trace DNA that was taken from the victim's clothes was found to belong to an unknown male. This discovery induced the DA to send the Ramseys a letter of apology in 2008, declaring the family completely cleared. In February 2009, the Boulder police took the case back from the DA and reopened the investigation. Media coverage of the case has focused on John Bennett's brief beauty pageant career, as well as her parents' wealth and the unusual evidence found in the case. Media reports have also questioned how the police handled the case. Ramsey family members and their friends have filed defamation suits against several media organizations.